"Don't run," he said softly, and somehow that made Emily want to run even more. The music was loud, the kind that shook through your chest, lights strung overhead in warm gold lines, people laughing, dancing, holding paper cups and greasy food. Everything normal, everything safe, except him. 2 hours earlier, she had been just another face in the crowd, finishing her shift at a food stand, counting tips that barely covered rent, telling herself tonight would be different, that she would stay, enjoy the festival for once. That's when she bumped into him. Not hard, just enough to spill a drop of soda on his sleeve. She'd apologized fast, embarrassed, expecting irritation, but he only looked at her, really looked, like she was something rare. "You're fine," he had said, voice low, calm, almost amused. She should have walked away. She didn't. They walked together instead, past glowing booths and spinning rides, and something about him felt wrong in a way she couldn't explain. People moved around him without noticing. No one brushed his shoulder. No one got too close. Even the air felt colder near him, like stepping into shade on a hot day. He didn't eat, didn't drink, just watched. Watched her. Asked questions no stranger should ask, small things, personal things, like he already knew the answers. And still, she stayed. Because when he smiled, it felt safe. Too safe. Then the lights flickered. Just once. Then again. A group nearby laughed it off, but Emily felt it. A shift she couldn't name. She glanced at him. His eyes caught the light wrong. Not brown. Not hazel. Something deeper. Something that didn't belong here. "Lucien?" she asked, her voice barely above the music. He tilted his head slightly, studying her, like he was deciding something. And that's when the crowd parted without meaning to, a silent ripple spreading outward, leaving them standing in a space that suddenly felt too open, too exposed. Emily's heartbeat quickened. "Who are you?" she whispered. He didn't answer right away. He just stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than the chaos around them, yet it cut through everything. "Someone you were never supposed to find." Emily's breath caught as the noise of the festival seemed to fade into something distant and hollow, like she had stepped out of the world without moving an inch. And Lucien was the only thing that felt real, standing there with that calm, impossible stillness, watching her as if this moment had always been inevitable, as if he had seen it coming long before she had even known his name. And she shook her head slightly, trying to ground herself, trying to find something normal in the flashing lights and the smell of fried food and sugar in the air. But nothing felt the same anymore. Nothing felt safe. "That is not funny," she said, forcing a small laugh that did not sound like her own. But Lucien did not smile this time, did not soften, and that was what scared her the most, because every second before this he had been warm in a quiet, controlled way, like someone carefully pretending, and now that layer was gone, leaving something colder underneath, something ancient and unreadable. And people continued to move around them, brushing past without noticing the tension that had locked her in place, as if whatever he was somehow pushed the world away from them, bending it without effort. And Emily took a small step back, her heel catching slightly on uneven pavement, her pulse racing faster, louder, until it felt like it might give her away. "I should go," she said quickly, glancing over her shoulder toward the crowd, toward the exits she suddenly could not clearly see, because every direction looked the same, every path blurred by motion and light. And when she looked back at him, he had moved closer without her noticing, closing the distance in a way that made no sense. And she froze, because she knew she had not seen him take a step, not even a shift. "You can try," he said quietly, not threatening, not angry, just certain, and that certainty settled over her heavier than fear, because it felt like truth, like something already decided. And before she could respond, before she could turn and push her way through the crowd, a subtle change rippled through the air, a presence that made her instincts flare. And from the edges of the festival, sleek black cars appeared, moving too smoothly through spaces that should have been impossible to navigate, stopping with precision just a few feet away, their doors opening in perfect unison. And the figures who stepped out did not rush, did not hesitate. They moved with quiet purpose, heads slightly lowered, eyes fixed only on him. And Emily's stomach dropped as they approached, and then, right there under the glow of carnival lights and laughter that continued as if nothing was happening. They bowed, deep and absolute, and one of them spoke in a voice that carried just enough for her to hear, "Your Majesty." And the words hit her harder than anything else, harder than the cold in his skin or the strange pull in the air, because suddenly every piece fell into place in a way she could not deny, and Lucien exhaled slowly, almost regretful, before his gaze returned to her. Softer now, but no less powerful. "I wanted one night where you could look at me and not know," he said, and Emily felt the ground beneath her certainty disappear completely, because whatever this was, whatever he truly was, she understood one thing with terrifying clarity. She was already too deep inside it to simply walk away. Emily could not feel her fingers anymore, not from cold, but from the way reality seemed to slip out from under her, like everything she thought she understood had been quietly replaced without her noticing, and the word echoed in her mind again, "Your Majesty," over and over, refusing to fade, refusing to be explained away, and she looked at Lucien as if seeing him for the first time, really seeing him. The way he stood untouched by the chaos, the way the light bent around him instead of landing on him, the way those people waited for his slightest movement as if it mattered more than anything else in the world, and suddenly every strange detail from the past 2 hours felt like a warning she had ignored, every unanswered question now too loud to escape. "No," she said under her breath, shaking her head, taking another step back, then another, this time forcing herself to turn, pushing into the crowd, because instinct finally screamed louder than curiosity, and she moved fast, weaving between strangers, brushing past shoulders, ignoring confused looks, her heart pounding so hard it blurred her vision. But something was wrong, something she could not explain, because no matter how far she moved, the exits did not get closer, the paths curved back into themselves. The music sounded distant and warped, like she was running in a place that refused to let her leave. And when she finally stopped, breathless, chest tight, she realized the crowd around her had thinned without her noticing, leaving too much space, too much silence between the laughter. And that was when she heard his voice again, not raised, not urgent, but right behind her, "Emily." And she froze, every instinct telling her not to turn around, but she did anyway, slowly, because part of her still needed to understand, still needed this to make sense, and there he was, standing exactly where she had left him, and somehow also right here, close enough that she could see the faint glow in his eyes even without the lights. And this time there was no pretending left in his expression, no softness to hide behind, just something vast and controlled and patient, like time itself moved differently for him. And the people who had bowed before were now closer, forming a quiet perimeter without touching her, without even looking directly at her, as if she was not meant for them to see. And Lucien took one slow step forward, measured, deliberate. And Emily felt it like a shift in gravity, like the world aligning around him instead of the other way around. "You were not supposed to find out like this," he said, voice low, almost regretful, and she swallowed hard, forcing her voice to work despite the tightness in her throat. "Then what was supposed to happen?" she asked, and for a brief second something flickered in his gaze, something human, something conflicted, before it disappeared beneath that same calm certainty. "You were supposed to walk away," he answered quietly, "and forget me." And the way he said it made her realize he had never believed that would actually happen, and neither had she, not really, not from the moment their eyes met, and now standing here, trapped between the life she knew and whatever world he belonged to. Emily understood something far more terrifying than his title, far more dangerous than the men who bowed to him. She understood that even if he let her go, she might not be able to leave at all. Emily felt the words settle into her chest like something irreversible, heavy and final, and for a moment she just stood there, staring at him, trying to understand how something that had felt so simple only hours ago had become this, something vast and impossible, something that made the air itself feel different. And she shook her head slowly, not in denial but in resistance, like she was trying to hold on to the version of the night that had existed before him, before the way he looked at her now, not as a stranger, not even as a lover, but as something far more complicated, something tied to him in a way she had never agreed to. "You do not get to decide that for me," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. and Lucien's expression shifted just slightly. Not anger, not surprise, but something closer to interest, like she had said something unexpected, something rare. And the faintest hint of a smile touched his lips before disappearing again. "No," he said quietly. "I do not." And for a brief second the space between them felt almost normal, almost human, like two people arguing in the middle of a crowded night. But then the presence around them pressed back in. The silent figures, the waiting cars, the invisible line she could not cross. And Emily glanced past him, noticing for the first time how the crowd seemed to flow around the edges of where they stood, never breaking into it, never questioning it, as if the world itself had agreed to ignore whatever was happening here. And that realization sent a sharp wave of unease through her, because it meant this was not chaos, not an accident. It was controlled, deliberate, and she was standing in the center of it. "Then let me go," she said quickly, seizing the opening before she could lose it, before fear could swallow her words. And Lucien held her gaze, completely still, completely silent, and in that silence she felt the weight of something unspoken, something he was not saying out loud, something that mattered more than everything else he had already revealed. And when he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before, almost careful. "If you walk away now," he said, "you will not remember me." And the words landed wrong, not like a promise, not like comfort, but like a warning wrapped in gentleness. And Emily's chest tightened as she searched his face, trying to find a lie, trying to find something human to hold on to. But all she found was that same calm certainty, the same quiet power that had never once wavered. And for the first time since this started, she realized the choice in front of her was not as simple as leaving or staying. Because leaving meant losing something she could not yet name, something she had barely begun to understand, and staying meant stepping into a world that had already begun to close around her. And Lucien took one step closer, just one, slow and measured, giving her space to move back if she wanted. But she did not. She could not, because despite everything, despite the fear and the impossibility of it all, there was still something in the way he looked at her that felt real, something that made walking away feel like the greater risk. And his voice dropped just enough that only she could hear it. "You are not here by accident," he said, and the certainty in those words sent a quiet chill through her. Because deep down, beneath the fear, beneath the confusion, a small part of her had already begun to believe it. The thought lingered longer than it should have, echoing quietly in Emily's mind, not loud, not overwhelming, but persistent, like something that had always been there waiting to be noticed. And she drew in a slow breath, trying to steady herself, trying to separate what she felt from what he was making her feel, because there had to be a difference. There had to be a line she could hold on to. "That sounds like something you want me to believe," she said, her voice softer now, but sharper in meaning. And Lucien watched her carefully, not interrupting, not correcting, just observing, as if her reaction mattered more than her words. And that only made everything feel more real, more dangerous, because it meant this was not a game to him, not a moment he would simply walk away from. And she folded her arms instinctively, grounding herself, feeling the fabric of her sleeve, the warmth of her own skin, reminding herself she was still here, still human, still in control, even if the world around her felt like it had shifted into something unrecognizable. And for the first time she looked past him, really looked, noticing how the figures near the cars remained perfectly still, not watching her directly but aware of her in a way that felt precise and measured, like she was being assessed without being touched. And the realization sent a quiet chill through her spine, because it meant this was not just about him. This was a system, a structure, something far larger than one man with secrets. And she turned back to him quickly, refusing to let that thought grow. "What happens if I do not go with you?" she asked, not as a challenge, but as a need to understand the boundaries of what was happening. And Lucien did not answer immediately, his gaze shifting for just a fraction of a second toward the figures behind him. And in that single glance, she saw something she had not expected, not fear, not doubt, but calculation, like he was measuring outcomes, considering consequences that went far beyond her. And when his attention returned to her, it was sharper, more focused, as if a decision had been made. "Then they will not forget you," he said quietly, And the simplicity of that sentence carried more weight than anything else he had said so far, because it implied something worse than being taken, something colder than control, something that extended beyond him entirely. And Emily felt her throat tighten, her thoughts racing as she tried to piece together what that meant. But before she could ask, before she could push further, Lucien took another step closer, closing the space between them in a way that felt final, not threatening, not forced, but absolute. And his voice dropped just enough that the rest of the world seemed to fall away again. "I can keep you safe," he said, and this time there was no distance in his tone, no mask, just a quiet certainty that felt dangerously close to truth. And Emily held his gaze, searching for hesitation, for doubt, for anything that would give her a reason to refuse. But all she found was that same unwavering calm, that same quiet gravity that had drawn her in from the beginning. And she realized with a slow, sinking clarity that this was not just about whether she trusted him. It was about whether she was willing to step into something she could never fully understand. And as the music in the distance swelled and the lights flickered again overhead, Emily felt the last fragile pieces of her normal life slipping further away, replaced by a choice that did not feel like a choice at all. Emily did not realize she had stopped breathing until her chest tightened and forced a slow inhale. And the air felt different now, heavier, like it carried weight instead of relief. And Lucien's words lingered between them, not loud, not demanding, but impossible to ignore. "I can keep you safe." And for a moment she almost believed him without question, almost stepped forward without thinking. But something inside her resisted, something small but stubborn, the last piece of herself that still belonged to the life she understood. And she shook her head slightly, more to clear her thoughts than to disagree. "Safe from what?" she asked quietly. And this time the question mattered, because it was not fear speaking, it was awareness. And Lucien's expression shifted again, not visibly to anyone else, but she saw it, a flicker of something restrained, something he chose not to say out loud. And that silence answered her more than words ever could, because it meant the danger was real, and it was already close. And before she could press further, one of the figures near the cars moved, just one step, subtle, controlled, but enough to break the stillness. And Emily's attention snapped toward it instantly, her instincts reacting before her thoughts could catch up. And the man did not look at her directly, did not speak, but his presence alone carried a quiet pressure that made her pulse spike again. And Lucien noticed. Of course he did, because nothing seemed to escape him. And he turned slightly, just enough to acknowledge the movement without fully shifting his focus away from her. And when he spoke, his voice was no longer just for her. It carried authority now, calm but absolute. "Not here," he said. And the man inclined his head immediately, stepping back into place without another motion. And Emily felt it then, not fear, not exactly, but understanding. Because whatever power Lucien held, it was not something distant or symbolic. It was immediate, present, obeyed without hesitation. And that realization changed everything, because it meant she was not standing beside someone dangerous in theory. She was standing beside someone who shaped the behavior of everyone around him without effort. And she swallowed hard, her thoughts racing faster now, trying to catch up to a reality that refused to slow down for her. "You said I could walk away," she reminded him, her voice quieter this time, not as steady as before. Because doubt had started to creep in, not doubt about him, but doubt about what leaving actually meant. And Lucien held her gaze, unflinching, and for a long second he said nothing. And in that silence she felt the answer forming before he even spoke, because the space around them had already shifted again, the crowd further away, the sounds more distant, like the world was gently closing its doors without asking her permission. And when he finally responded, his voice was softer than it had been all night, almost careful. "You can," he said, and there was truth in it, undeniable and clear. "But you will not leave untouched." And the weight of those words settled into her chest, because she understood them in a way she could not fully explain, understood that something had already changed the moment she met him, something that would follow her whether she stayed or ran. And for the first time since this began, Emily realized that the choice in front of her was no longer about escape. It was about what she was willing to become. Emily felt the shift the moment the thought crossed her mind, subtle but undeniable. like something inside her had been waiting for her to reach this exact point. And she looked at Lucian again, really looked this time, not at the power around him, not at the silence he commanded, but at him, and something clicked, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet certainty that sent a chill through her chest. This was not an accident, she said slowly, the realization forming as she spoke, and Lucian did not interrupt, did not deny it, which told her more than any answer could. And her heartbeat quickened, not just from fear now, but from something deeper, something unsettling. You knew, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. From the moment you saw me, you knew this would happen. And for the first time all night, Lucian's composure cracked, just slightly, just enough for her to see it, something raw beneath the control, something he had been holding back, and he stepped closer, not closing the distance completely, but enough that she could feel the weight of his presence more clearly than ever. No, he said quietly, and the word carried more weight than denial. It carried truth. I felt it. And the simplicity of that answer hit her harder than anything else, because it mirrored something she had been trying not to admit to herself. That pull, that unexplainable sense of familiarity from the very beginning, and her breath caught as she stared at him, realizing that whatever this was, it had not started here, not tonight, not by chance. And the world around them seemed to dim again, the lights fading slightly, the sounds softening as if the moment itself demanded space, and Lucian's voice dropped lower, closer, more dangerous in its honesty. The moment you walked into that crowd, he said, every instinct I have told me to leave, and I did not. And something in the way he said it made her chest tighten, because it was not a confession, it was a warning, and she felt it, the weight of what he was not saying, that whatever he was, whatever ruled his world, had rules even he did not break lightly, and yet he had stayed, for her, and that realization struck deeper than fear ever could, because it meant she was not just caught in something dangerous, she was the reason it had begun, and Emily took a small step back, not to run, but to breathe, to think, and her voice trembled just slightly as she spoke. Then why does it feel like I have known you longer than tonight? And the question hung there, heavy and unavoidable, and for a moment Lucian said nothing, his gaze searching hers as if deciding whether to cross a line he had been holding for far too long. And when he finally answered, his voice was almost a whisper, but it cut through everything. Because you have, he said, and the words landed like something breaking open, something buried deep inside her shifting in response, something she could not remember but could suddenly feel, and the air around them seemed to still completely, as if even the world was waiting to see what she would do with that truth. And Emily realized then that walking away would not just mean forgetting him, it would mean losing a part of herself she had not even known existed. And that was the moment everything inside her changed. Emily did not step away this time, did not look back at the festival or the life she had come from, because suddenly it felt smaller, distant, like something that belonged to a version of her that had already begun to fade. And she looked at Lucian with a new kind of awareness, not just fear, not just curiosity, but recognition, something quiet and undeniable that settled deep in her chest. And her voice came softer now, steadier. If I walk away, I lose this, she said, not as a question but as a realization, and Lucian did not soften, did not comfort her with false reassurance. He only nodded once, slow and certain, because he understood exactly what she meant, and that honesty, that refusal to pretend, only made everything more real, more impossible to ignore, and Emily felt her pulse slow slightly, not because the situation had become safe, but because she had stopped fighting it, stopped trying to force it back into something normal. And the silence between them deepened, not empty, but full, like something waiting to be acknowledged. And when she finally moved, it was deliberate, a choice made with full awareness of what it meant, and she stepped forward, closing the distance completely, her hand lifting slowly until it hovered just inches from his. And for a moment she hesitated, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision, because she understood now that this was not just about him. It was about stepping into something that had already begun to shape her, something she could not undo once she accepted it. And Lucian did not rush her, did not reach first. He simply waited, his presence steady, unyielding. And when her fingers finally touched his, the reaction was immediate. not visible to anyone else, but undeniable to her, like a quiet current running beneath her skin, something familiar and foreign at the same time, and the world around them seemed to fall completely silent, deeper than before, as if the moment itself had been written long before either of them arrived. And Lucien's hand closed around hers, not tightly, not possessively, but with a certainty that felt final, and his voice came low and close, softer than anything she had heard from him all night. "This is the part where everything changes," he said, and Emily did not pull away, did not hesitate, because for the first time since this began, she was not reacting, she was choosing. And as the figures near the cars straightened and the door opened without a sound, she realized with a quiet, unwavering clarity that she was not being taken into his world. She was stepping into something that had been waiting for her long before she knew it existed. Emily felt the world shift the moment her fingers closed around his, not in some dramatic way that could be seen or heard, but in something quieter, deeper, like a door had opened without a sound, and she had already stepped through it before she could change her mind. And for a second she held onto his hand without moving, as if testing the reality of it, the coldness of his skin, the steadiness of his presence. And when she looked up at him, there was no hesitation left in his expression, no distance, just that same calm certainty that had followed him from the beginning. Only now it felt closer, more real, and the space around them responded instantly, the figures near the cars moving with silent precision, opening the nearest door. Without a word, without a signal she could see, as if everything had already been decided long before she arrived, and the festival behind her continued like nothing had changed, laughter rising, music pulsing, lights spinning in warm colors that suddenly felt too bright, too distant, like a memory she had not yet lost but already could not return to, and she turned her head slightly, just enough to glance back, just enough to take it in one last time, the normal life she had stepped out of. Without fully understanding when it happened, and a quiet realization settled over her, not regret, not exactly, but awareness that this was the last moment it would ever feel like hers, and Lucien's hand tightened just slightly around hers, not pulling, not forcing, just grounding, and his voice came low and steady beside her. "You can still change your mind," he said, and the words surprised her, not because of what they meant, but because of how genuine they sounded, like he would actually let her go if she chose to. And for a brief second she considered it, truly considered it, stepping back, letting go, walking into the crowd, and pretending none of this had happened. But the thought did not hold. It slipped away almost as quickly as it came, because something inside her had already made the decision before her mind could catch up, and she shook her head slowly, her voice quiet but certain. "I already did," she said, and Lucien studied her for a moment, as if committing that answer to something deeper than memory, before he gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, and together they stepped toward the car, the distance short but final, and as she crossed that invisible line, Emily felt the last fragile connection to her old world loosen and fall away, replaced by something unknown, something vast and waiting, and as the door closed behind her with a soft, final sound, the noise of the festival faded completely, leaving only silence and the steady presence beside her. And in that silence, as the car began to move, Emily realized with a quiet certainty that whatever waited ahead was not something she had been dragged into. It was something she had chosen,